Before there was Secretary of State Colin Powell, before Dr. Mae Jefferson became the first African-American woman to travel in space, before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous I Have a Dream speech, there were the Tuskegee Airmen. Prior to December 7, 1941, America resisted becoming involved in World War II. But after the Japanese dropped those deadly bombs on Pearl Harbor, it was war. White men have always been able to fight for their country. Black men, such as Joe Louis, had to fight to be able to fight. According to a 1925 secret study by the War Department, black men were inferior to whites, and should remain in menial jobs such as kitchen help and laborers. Some blacks didn't take no for an answer from whites that refused to train them. Eugene Bullard left America and went to France to learn to fly. During World War I, he fought for the French. In America, Bessie Coleman from Chicago began her aviation career as a stunt pilot in the early 1920s and turned to the French for a license. James Banning and Thomas Allen became the first blacks to fly a transcontinental flight in 1932. But when the United States entered World War II, many talented blacks were denied the right to fly. In anticipation of war, on September 17, 1938, President Roosevelt approved the civilian pilot training program in 13 schools, but blacks were not included. In 1939, Congress authorized private training of military pilots by civilian schools. The law prohibited discrimination and specifically stated that blacks be trained as pilots and technicians at a school designated for training persons to enlist into the Army Air Corps. Black men from all over the country came to the Tuskegee Institute to learn to do what whites believed they couldn't do, fly. By the end of 1940, 231 blacks were licensed aviators, but the Army still refused to admit them into the Air Force. Charles Alfred Anderson, a self-taught flyer, was a civilian pilot trainer. He conducted a flight program at the Tuskegee Institute. In 1941, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt visited Tuskegee. Having heard the myth that Negroes couldn't fly, she requested that Anderson give her a ride. After that flight, it is believed that she encouraged the president to admit blacks into the Air Force. Under pressure from the supporters of black aviation, in January of 1941, the War Department announced the formation of an all-black squadron. This experiment brought protests from the black community, and particularly the NAACP, which insisted that the military be integrated, but the War Department insisted on segregation. One of the reasons the War Department selected Tuskegee for the experiment was because it was in the South, where segregation was practiced. The first group of cadets began training in June of 1941. The class consisted of 13 men, all college graduates, and some were pilots. Of the 13, only 5 graduated on March 6, 1942. These graduates were placed in the 99th Pursuit Squadron, a segregated unit. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. was placed in charge of the 99th. He was a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. As the only black at West Point, Davis endured 4 years during which no one talked to him outside of class. The commander of the base was Colonel Kimball. The black press charged at Tuskegee was a hellhole of prejudice, with colored and white signs all around the base. Blacks and whites could not socialize together and were not given promotions. In February of 1943, Noel Parrish became the Tuskegee Airfield commander. He took down the colored and white signs and brought black celebrities to entertain the men. Since there was no segregated group for the 99th to join, they simply continued to train far longer than white pilots did. As new cadets graduated and other black fighter squadrons were formed, it was clear that the Army was purposely refusing to send the Tuskegee Airmen into combat. Finally, on April 15, 1943, the 99th was shipped to North Africa and the Mediterranean. On July 2, 1943, on his 8th mission, Lieutenant Charles Hall became the first member of the 99th to shoot down the plane. There were occasional casualties and POWs. Tuskegee Airmen such as Alexander Jefferson eventually saw combat in Europe and encountered the enemy firsthand.
They told us that over in southern this August the 12th, 1944, the invasion of southern France came off on August the 15th. And our job was to go over and knock out these radar stations along the coast of southern France that would detect ships coming across the horizon. And the 301st was assigned to the radar stations right opposite the city of Toulon. And my squadron, 16 airplanes, went in and fired at these radar stations. The first 4 guys went in, and by the time I get there, the side of the cliff is with these little red specks, anti-aircraft. And as it went across the top of the target, I think I was about 50 feet, I don't know. Damn thing came up through the floor. Fire came up right in front of me, going down through the trees. I hit the ground and rolled over, and the German said, "Ja, ach so, ja, Leutnant," and rubbing this gold bar. "Leutnant, yeah, okay, buddy, yeah, okay."
They flew missions over Europe. They escorted bomber planes flown by whites. The airmen had their black mechanics paint the tails of their planes red. The white bombers were unaware that the pilots in the red-tailed fighter planes escorting them were black. The Red Tails were the only fighter squadron that never lost a bomber plane to enemy fire. While some of the Tuskegee Airmen were fighting the Italians and Germans, others were meeting stiff resistance in the States. The supporters of the Airmen pressed for blacks to be trained not only as fighter pilots, but also as bombardiers. Finally, in January of 1944, the 477th Bombardment Group was activated. The group never saw combat. The Army purposely sabotaged the 477th since the Army did not want blacks to fly bombers. They were shifted from base to base and kept in crowded facilities. On April 5, 1945, a group of black officers from the 477th stationed at Freedman Field, Indiana, were arrested for refusing to obey an order that prohibited them from using the officers' club. Although they never made it to war, they helped break down racial barriers. My grandfather was involved in one racist exchange on his way back to Tuskegee.
Went back to Tuskegee, and after I had done my Air Corps Basic at Keesterfield, Mississippi, Air Corps Basic, and I went to Texas when my godmother passed, Houston, Texas, and on my way back, I stopped at Biloxi, Mississippi, where Keesterfield was, and I knew some of my fellow Air Corps men were still there. And I got off the train and asked one of the fellows there at the bus stop there, if this was the bus going to Keesterfield, and he wouldn't give me an answer. So finally, when the bus filled up and they were getting ready to go, he let me get on, and I had to stand in the door of the bus.
When the war in Europe ended, the men returned to America. They were still being treated as second-class citizens. Finally, on July 26, 1948, nearly 3 years after Germany surrendered, Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981 integrating the military. After the war, the Airmen refused to let the history of their struggles be forgotten. They created the Tuskegee